Hi there, and welcome to another Pi Crowdcast. Thanks for joining us. Today we have Pi mentor Stephen Green with us. Stephen, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Stephen's a longtime mentor for Pi, good friend. He's had to put up with more crowdcasts with me than he cares to admit, so it's nice to have him on Pi too. Just a few logistics, tactics before we get going. You can ask questions right down at the bottom of the screen. There's an Ask a Question button there, and the beauty of using that instead of the chat for questions is people can then go in and upvote questions. So even if you don't have a question for Stephen, you can pop in there, upvote questions that you like, and that way we can focus on the things that are most important to the people in attendance. And if you have to leave or something comes up, this whole thing will be recorded. It'll be available right at this link. So you can just come back and catch up on the content. So thank you all for coming. It's good to see you. Hey, Lauren. Let's get started with just Stephen. Give us your background and some context.
All right. First, I'll start our sponsor today, River Nets Hard Cider. If you pay for it, I don't know if it makes him a sponsor, but go get some River Nets. You'll be happy you did. So a little bit about me. Born in the Bay Area, grew up in Portland and in Detroit, Michigan. Fell in love with entrepreneurship, walking the streets of East Detroit with my uncle, who was in pharmaceutical sales in the 80s. I got the bug there, started my first business when I was in college. My degree's in economics, so I'm a numbers and spreadsheets nerd. Worked in the public sector, private sector, the largest and smallest bank in Oregon. Bank of the West was the large one, smallest one, Albina Community Bank. I was on the leadership team there. And then I spent 7 years doing economic development for the city of Portland at what was then PDC, now Prosper. And then been helping advising startups ever since. Along the way, helped start a venture fund. I'm on the Oregon Growth Board. We deploy public dollars for the Educational Stability Fund, about $25 million each year. We're a fund to fund, so we invest in larger institutional funds, but also smaller pre-institutional funds as well, with a focus on supporting consumer product companies, underrepresented communities, and rural founders around Oregon. So,
okay. One thing I appreciate about your community and your vision is you probably have the kind of broadest view of what's going on right now. Everything from tech to apparel to retail. Just give us your vantage on what you're seeing from entrepreneurs and small business. Like, what's going on out there?
As someone who loves to spend my time in spreadsheets and numbers and data, I think, just like I was appalled at what went down in 2008, I just can't step away and not think about the emotional toll all this is taking on everyone. Even the companies that are seeing an uptick in revenue, they're still having sleepless nights thinking about, employees getting sick or something breaking in the supply chain. And so, as much as I'd want to just problem solve and work on the quantifying things, the biggest part of all this is just the emotional toll that it's taking everyone and taking on everyone, and how important small things like texting people, shooting an email to someone they haven't talked to in a long time, how far small things like that go right now. Really important.
Well, and I think there's also some positive things that we've talked about, that this crisis kind of forced people to either pivot or look at other opportunities that they may have been waiting on. Are you seeing any positive stories come out of the pandemic?
Yeah. Being on the board for Built, we work with a lot of retail and consumer product companies. Talking with, there's a Latinx owned business on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Northeast Portland called Arrow Coffee, and the owner, Erica Escalante, went from having sales completely disappear 4 weeks ago to standing up a complete online presence, takeout and delivery of her products in less than a month. and she's back to where her revenues were prior to COVID. And it's amazing to see those kind of things happen. It's sad that she's forced to do that, but that kind of pivot for her is going to pay huge dividends, not only now, but also once we're past this and things somewhat normalize. And so, the digital divide, I think, is always the biggest barrier for businesses. I'm a big advocate of helping business owners learn the difference between working in the business and working on the business. And in working with businesses, so many businesses over the years have said, I don't have time to do social media. I don't have time to have a website. You don't have time not to do those things.
Right.
And the folks are figuring that out. And, when, it may not be a street closure or some sort of thing that's closing your one location, now everyone's closed and you've got to figure it out. And a lot of people are doing that. And that's what founders do. I mean, we're hustlers. And so, people are who we thought they were, and they're doing it with little to no financial resources and leveraging the community. And so this is where the close-knit relationships that we have here in Portland really, really pay dividends. You can call people and your competitors, you can call and get insights and feedback and ask for help. In a lot of other cities where I've worked, that's not the case. But in Portland, that's what really separates us.
Yeah, I think that's been, from my perspective in the tech community, one of the most interesting things to kind of watch. Portland, which has usually been a very siloed town, like the tech people kind of keep to themselves, food people kind of keep to themselves and all that. But there's really been a nice, everyone supporting everyone, not just happening like the folks who happen to be in your immediate community. So that's been really good to see. We're getting some questions rolling in and lots of votes. So thank you, folks. Really appreciate it. Keep those questions coming. Rather than me take up Stephen's time with my questions, I'm just going to dive into yours. We can talk about this all day. So let's start with this one, Stephen. What are some of those key areas you would be advising startups to watch out for the next few months?
So as a recovering banker and VC, I know more than most people that cash is king. And when sales are dwindling right now is the time to really figure out where cash is for your business, how you save cash, how you bring it in, and more importantly, the cycles of cash. And so, when you think about it as a business owner, the things that you pay for, you don't pay for things with revenue. You don't pay for things with profit. You pay for things with cash. And when times are good, you look at the checking account, money's there, I go and spend it. But when times get tough, now you have to think about your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, and you have to be able to understand and know the cycles of with when cash comes and it goes. And so this is requiring businesses to focus on that. And so people listen to the advice that I give now a little bit more when it comes to cash. Go figure. And you can bring some more in, but oftentimes the easiest thing is to save on things, right? So look around your business. What are the essentials? What are the things where you can't go a day in business without these things? And then make a list of what are the things that are after that. All right, now I'm going to go through. Do I need that Canva membership that I have? That's $12 a month. Do I need X, Y, and Z? Graphics account that I'm paying for monthly. And so, definitely work on whatever you can do to bring it in, but also focus on where the money's going. And so now is a great time to have people be really good stewards of understanding where cash is going and coming from.
Thank you. Next one. And this is from Eric Holscher, who is a Pi alum from way back in the day. Hey, Eric, good to hear from you. What is a good way to support our communities now that we can't gather in person? He asks because he says, we normally host conferences, but now we're trying to find ways to support folks in new ways.
So there are a couple of different ways to support people. Generally, it's time, talent, and treasure, right? Treasure gets to the monetary piece. And so if you're putting on a conference, that's a lot of money that's going to different businesses. So when you're not doing the physical conference, what's a way that you can do a virtual conference where you can still provide a way for people to get access to, the different services that the businesses were going to be able to provide, and try and do that in a way that's, sensitive to revenue, where you're not spending a bunch of money out of pocket. But understand that these businesses, everyone's struggling. There's no situation where this isn't touching different businesses. The other piece is, we all have platforms, right? So, if you're a business that may not have a lot of money right now, but you're Rick Terozzi and you've got 20,000+ followers on Twitter, go and spend, dedicate a day every week where all you're going to do is hype up, small businesses in your industry, in your city, in your neighborhood that have a smaller platform in leveraging social media, or no social media at all. This is one of those things that doesn't take a ton of time. It costs $0. And, I think it goes a long way in helping businesses get the kind of visibility that they need. And then offer up office hours where your talent can be made available, right? If you are the number one SEO person in the city, offer up 2 hours a week virtually on Zoom, to where you'll take office hours and you'll help businesses navigate figuring out what search engine optimization is and Google AdWords and those things that a month ago they'd never even heard of. They would really, really, really appreciate that, but also know they don't know what they don't know. So don't expect them to ask you the right questions. You're going to have to kind of pull it out of them. But time, talent, and treasure, that's what we all have to provide, and really seek to provide value for other people.
I think the difficulty I find myself having, we talk about it a lot, that you can't ask the community to come to you. You have to go be in the community and participate in the community. At a time like this, where we're all forced to be separated, I think that digital divide becomes even more acute for folks. Do you have any thoughts on how to kind of bridge that gap that we're experiencing right now?
Well, no matter what, the digital divide's still going to be there, right? So I hope we can spend this time closing that gap. But also, if you've got time at home right now, like write letters to people, right? Everything doesn't have to be digital. Our youngest, our 7-year-old, wrote 14 letters to my mom this past weekend and gave them to her yesterday for Easter, and it blew my mom away. So as much as I think we're having to wrestle with the digital divide right now, it's never going to close, and you got to figure out ways to meet people where they're at, right? And that may be leaving notes and cards at a local church. That may be just sending somebody a text, right? So it doesn't have to be like you have to become have a doctorate in how to use Zoom, but knowing that this divide does exist, figuring out small ways to bridge it is really important. And you can't do everything for everyone, right? So every little bit matters here, right? And so, I think if I was giving advice to my younger self, like, it's okay if you can only help 4 people today, then you help 4 people, right? Don't let that get in the way. If you don't have the access to resources and knowledge to help thousands of folks, those 4 people will still be really, really appreciative of what they got. And so nothing is too small. And when you're doing those small things, those things really, really, really add up.
I think that's a really great segue into this next question, which is, speaking of your younger self, what advice would you give young native Portlanders at the beginning of their startup venture?
Portland's a very unique market when it comes to starting a business. And oftentimes things that work here will not work elsewhere. And conversely, things that work in other places will not work here. I remember when I worked for WeWork, one of the no-brainers to me was, how do we have these 3 buildings and we offer coffee from Philadelphia? Like, no one in Portland would ever start a business in Portland and serve coffee from somewhere else. Like, that's duh. But that was a real game changer when you started talking to WeWork, because when they where in other cities that wasn't a big deal, but in Portland it was, and it's not right, it's not wrong, but it's a really big deal. And so, as a business owner, starting here, yes, know your market, know your customer here, but also do that same work in figuring out what Seattle is like, what San Francisco is like, what Cincinnati is like, because it's going to be different, and it's not going to be necessarily better or worse, but it's definitely going to be different.
Cool. Thank you. We're going to have to get to this one eventually. I know you don't even want to answer it, but I'm going to have to ask it because people are upvoting it. Yeah. So you are outspoken, positively outspoken. You're definitely a leader. So here comes when are you running to become the official mayor of Portland? Losing your unofficial title and actually becoming official.
Yeah. I think working at the city for 7 years taught me a lot of things. And when I stepped away, I realized I could be more helpful to the city of Portland away from working at the city than being there. Also, getting to know our last 4 mayors relatively well. That's a really tough job. And it's not only a job that you have to do personally, but you have to take your family through it. And, that's not something that I would ever, wish on my counterparts. They didn't sign up to, I remember one of the stories that Ted told me about was, people being at his house and yelling at his daughter. Like, he's at his home. His home's his castle. And, someone's sitting there taking time out of their day to cuss him out in front of his daughter. It's horrible. And so, I don't see it as, there's a ton of positions on the field, right? Mayor is one of those positions. I think there's a ton of other valuable positions. It's just not the position I'd ever play.
Okay. So do you see yourself staying more on the private side, or is there anything public that could draw you back in?
I would never say never about anything. I think, I loved working at PDC, and I think the potential in my mind for what Prosper could be doing and where their focus could be and the relationships they could be cultivating in the community, and some of the ills that I think the ecosystem here in Portland has, I think are essential and game changers. And I would love to see those things happen, whether I'm working there or not. I'm all about the community. I'll be in Portland in 30 years. I might be buried here, but I'll still be here. So I'm committed completely. So I would never say never, but it'd have to be the right situation. Right now, I love, hooking up with the fellas and finding out ways that we can support people in the community. But you don't have to be an employee of the city or the state to do that.
Right. Yep. Thank you. This one from Gregory, I'm going to hopefully contextualize correctly. He asks, what suggestions do you have for deep tech startups? And so I'm not clear, and Gregory, if you're around, you can put into chat. Are you meaning more like hardware, hard kind of tech, or are you meaning like more infrastructure deep tech? If you could let us know on that one, we can get back to that one because that one got quite a few votes. In the meantime, while we're waiting, Tammy asks, when businesses are going digital, events and conferences are happening digitally, and connecting with other people, even friends and family, is also digital. How can companies keep from burning people out on that digital format?
Tammy.
I don't have a good answer for that one.
Yeah, I don't either, but I will say you don't put digital on everything, right? This is a time to really know who your customer is and know who your customer is not, right? And so as many digital tools that are out there, if I'm a business and my core customer is over the age of 55 and they're in rural settings, and they are more likely to have a hardwired phone than a cell phone, chances are, even if I get a doctorate in Zoom, it's not going to work for me. And so with all of these changes, you have to kind of test your assumptions around who your customer base is and who it isn't, and also be testing and iterating on who potential new customer bases are, right? And that starts with making a hypothesis and putting it out there. Done beats perfect. I think last week Casey covered it really well. Now's a time to be trying things and to be figuring it out, while also maintaining your value proposition and being authentic. I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing I learned from my experience with the TEDx folks and talking to people is people respond to when you're being authentic. Period. And now is not the time to just throw COVID onto things just because you feel like everyone's doing it. We've all gotten those emails, with COVID added to it. And you're like, this makes no sense. But somewhere in some marketing team, someone was like, oh, I know what we'll do. Just put COVID on the front or the back, I think.
Yep. Yeah. And I always think about we can just talk on the phone. We don't always have to see one another. We could just pick up the phone and chat like the good old days. Although I never answer my phone, so that wouldn't really work. But still, you know what I mean. Gregory got back to us, so let me jump back into this one. So he was asking about hard tech like fusion, fission. We can tell what time the neutron core looks like. So Steph, maybe if I can put this in a bit of a different context, prior to a month or two ago, there were massive grants or substantial venture capital that was at least accessible to folks who are working on really big problems. If you are an entrepreneur who is driven in that direction, what should you be doing today?
Oh, wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
The advice I've been giving everyone right now is make plans week by week because things are going to change in a week. And so, I think that applies to every industry and every vertical. Make a plan for the next 4 or 5 days and figure out where that takes you. It's not the best thing to hear in the world, but it's unfortunately the reality that we're in. I've been trying to help a lot of businesses through the process of getting PPP loans completed, and the rules get changed every 2 or 3 days, and it's not ideal, but it's real. And I had one person that I was helping, and literally the rug was just pulled out from underneath them, and it was like there's nothing you can do about that. But what we learned was, don't make long-term plans right now. So that kind of stuff, it'll be interesting to see how it comes back, how it's really impacted. But I don't see any answers for it in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And Dwayne had a question that was getting some upvotes. All right. What are the top 3 things entrepreneurs can do to support each other right now?
Oh, gotcha. I talked to a founder in Atlanta last week, and they have calling groups where literally everyone has a list of 20 different founders, and all they do is shoot emails, calls, or texts to them, and they commit to doing it at least once a week and just making themselves available. Again, the emotional toll of all of this is really the most shattering thing, and to make assumptions around, oh, well, Rick's business is up, so I'm not going to check in on him. You're missing out on the fact that Rick may be losing sleep he is losing sleep at night thinking about, man, I have these 4 staff working around the clock, and if one of them gets sick, I gotta close down. And so being thoughtful and intentional on checking in on folks, because the emotional toll is real. And I think part of the secret sauce of being a founder is you're smart enough to know something's a good idea, but dumb enough not to say no. Because if you know too much, you'll talk yourself out of it, and you'll just, I'm just gonna go work at Intel and make a ton of money and not have the stress. And so we're still dealing with a group of people that oftentimes don't know the questions that they should be asking themselves, let alone what the answers should be. And so I believe entrepreneurship, it has to be a very, very, very intentional social interaction. You have to be checking in with folks consistently. And so, that's one of the things people have been doing. The other piece is just humanizing this. I think the city and the state have been doing a lot of different work, and the only thing that I would add on to what they've been doing is really humanizing things. And the way I would do that is, nightly Instagram live videos, from people at Prosper or the mayor's office, and just saying like, hey, here's what we were working on today, and we didn't figure anything out. We don't have any answers, but these are some really tough questions, and we'd love to get your feedback here or whatever. But we've been thinking about you folks all this day, and here's what we stood on. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Be safe. Wash your hands. Rinse and repeat. Because I feel like even in the best situations, Portland founders feel like they're isolated and by themselves, because most of the people in networks have daily jobs and want to go to happy hour at 5 o'clock. Blah 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 blah. And so right now, that's really, really heightened, where people feel like they're by themselves. And so, I don't think people want to have answers. They just want to know that you care and that they matter. So that's the one thing that I would add if I was the city or the state around being able to engage with founders, is the humanizing element of all this. Because a lot of the founders I talked to were just panicked out of their mind, and just reassuring them and being there, answering the phone call means a lot. So answer your phone, Nick.
All right, I'll start doing that, I guess. If you say so, I'll do it. Laura asked, based on that last response, how do we get involved in these call-in groups? Do you have any guidance there from the folks in Atlanta you were talking to?
Just make one. So,
Okay.
I think the biggest thing that I've learned from hanging around people like you and Dwayne is like, when you hear about something, like just do it. Like done beats perfect.
Yeah.
So, if I was you, Leah, I would start with, I'm going to do a list of 10 businesses. I'm going to figure out the contact information for the founders or C-suite folks. And I'm going to figure out a way to send an email, a text, or a phone call. And I'm going to do that daily or weekly or whatever. And maybe it's not even connecting with them directly. Maybe it's scheduling tweets and leveraging your platform on social media, and just say, hey, I'm thinking about Reverend Nat's hard cider. They make the best stuff in the world. And I don't have a job to buy their stuff right now, but they make the best stuff in the world. And so, nothing is too small, and that's the stuff that really multiplies. I'm always blown away when I look at the data behind what really drives our economies. And when you think about people, when you read Portland Business Journal, you read about people raising money, you read about businesses getting loans, but those represent the really small buckets of money. So less than 0.5% of U.S. companies will ever raise equity, right? Ever. It's a horrible tool in most cases. And then 70% of U.S. companies will never get a loan. And so, you've got, the normal way of funding a business is through two people, your customers and the money that you've already got in your pocket. But if you read Fast Company and Inc. and other media outlets, you're led to believe that your business is only legitimate if you're raising money or if you got a big loan. To break that down even more into the small weeds in a granular level, every day before COVID, people in Portland spent $4.5 million on food, just eating out, right? Every day. Last year, the biggest lender to small businesses, Umpqua Bank, did $30 million in small business loans, right? So it seems like a small amount, but that's like 10 days of just eating out for food, right? So if I'm a business and I'm looking for money, I should be going after customers, because that's a much bigger pot of money than loans and or equity ever is. And so how do we help founders pivot and chase those things?
Yeah. Speaking of that whole, mythology around how you fund and and found a company. And going back to the earlier question about entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs, that just seems like a really good time to talk about your efforts on Pitch Black. And what does the future of Pitch Black look like given where we are today? Maybe give people some context for what Pitch Black is.
Yeah. Gotcha. So Pitch Black is an event I started 5 years ago. And the point of the event is actually not the founders and raising money for the founders. The event stemmed from, I was sitting with a friend of mine who's in Atlanta now. She was in New York. And we were talking about Black entrepreneurship at a national level. And she was really focused on venture capital. Dismal stats there. Less than 0.1% of venture capital goes to Black women founders. It's horrendous. But what we realized was the number of Black founders was growing exponentially in the United States. And so at the time, I looked at the census data, and the number of Black founders in Oregon went up over 100% from 2007 to 2012. That data came out in 2015. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, but you don't hear their stories. And when I was going to things in the startup ecosystem, you definitely didn't see people either. And so I knew Black founders from being in banking and advising folks, but they weren't part of the ecosystem. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, I know these Black founders, and from the numbers, there's a larger and larger group of them. They're just disconnected from the mainstream dominant culture ecosystem. What if I could bring them together? And back in 2015, Shark Tank was pretty popular. And so I was like, I'll do something similar to Shark Tank. And so with the event, instead of having, stuffy know-it-all investors, put their nose up at people, the people in the audience pick the winners. But the secret of the event happens before a pitch ever goes down. And that's just that these Black founders are in the room with people in their city who want to see them be successful. And people from the dominant culture, mainstream, see these Black founders and the broad spectrum of stuff that they've been doing, are doing, and want to do. And that changes perspectives, right? And so if before that people were like, oh, well, I know Stephen and Dwayne, so I'm good. Like I know Black founders, versus, wow, there's over 5,000 of them, and I only know Stephen and Dwayne, and I went to this event where I connected with dozens of other folks. Wow, this is a big opportunity. And on the other side, for the Black founders, I think a lot of them felt like, well, no one wants to help me. No one wants to see me be successful. And my experience personally was always that it's the opposite. People want to help you. People want to support you. And so it was a way to bridge the gap. And so, when we did it the first year, I figured we'd have 30 or 40 people show up. We had over 100. It was trending on Twitter. It was fun. And so we've gone to do it in other cities all over the country. But the most important piece is just people building social capital and not about the money that's raised through it. And so, the way that I think, to your question, what happens with it going forward, we'll still have Pitch Black. Like, it's magic in a bottle. I mean, even 11 times in now with all the events around the country. The one we did this year at Wyden Kennedy was amazing. And, we can't not do that. But the bigger piece is, how do you build on it, and how do we help people, in other cities be able to have that same feeling? Because, I think every founder should be able to be in a room where 400 people are cheering for them and want to see them share their story and share their why. So.
Totally agree. And thank you again for building that in that community. It's a highlight every year for sure.
It's fun. And it's another, like, done beats perfect. Like, there is no team or I know spreadsheets. I don't know marketing. I don't know all those other things that are needed.
Well, I can remember we were sitting there scrambling to figure out Stripe or some way to pay for T-shirts, even though we had a bunch of T-shirts. Well, oops, forgot that part of it.
And now Jeff and Amy are like clockwork on T-shirts and swag. Like we're growing up. We're growing up.
So this is a really good lead in to this next question from Kim. Instead of going back to normal, what are some ways we emerge from this to help make things better for marginalized communities, businesses, the environment, and communication?
So I don't think we'll ever go back to normal from this. I think this is going to be a long enough kind of stint where it recalibrates things, and things may get back to looking similar, but I don't think they'll ever go back to the same. I think from a more micro level here in Portland, I think we won't take businesses for granted like we have, I think, historically. I'm a broken record on this. We're the largest city in the country not to have an Office of Small Business. And I think through this crisis, we're realizing what a huge financial, emotional, and cultural role that business has played in our communities. It's great to have Target here. It's great to have Walmart here. Oh, whatever, big business. But at the end of the day, like, people move to Portland because they want to be around local independent businesses. Those are the places where you take your selfies and you go on dates and all those things. And those are the businesses that are really being hit the hardest right now. And I think people are taking stock of that and learning, wow, like most of these businesses were always only 2 or 3 weeks or a month or 2 months away from losing it all. And so, don't confuse, someone's follower count or revenue totals with how they're doing on cash. And so I think we'll come out of this knowing, all right, we know our secret sauce still relies on these small independent companies. How do we support them? How do we support the ecosystem that continues to birth them, every decade? And that's really our differentiator between, when we're looking at Seattle and San Francisco, is we like to build stuff, not necessarily expensive stuff, but, craft is really our thing. And we like to spend time with our friends and, go do things on the weekend. We're not just working to work. I think, we'll look to be more intentional in how we support businesses instead of just saying, oh, well, they know Stephen or Rick and they'll figure it out. We'll go and we'll fill the gaps with Venture Portland. I think Venture Portland will become a more critical, utilized organization when it comes to connecting with and talking to businesses. I think there'll be some positions that exist at the city level and at the state level that will be more focused on businesses. We have 3 state ombudsmen that handle small business inquiries in the whole state. Which is crazy to me. Again, we don't have, a physical place. If you're a business that has questions, we don't have a physical place to go into in the city of Portland. And so I think when we come out of that, that'll happen. And that every business needs to have a website, right? And so I think one of the things I'd love to see is, if you're registering with the state of Oregon, you also register to get your own URL. Maybe you don't launch the website, but you secure the domain name right then and there, so you can activate it. Because we've definitely seen with the pivot right now, those that have been able to get online the quickest, their chances are better than those that really just don't at all.
Right. So right. Love that. Thank you. There have been a couple, and we've kind of been touching on politics a little bit, but there are a couple. David Kenny is here. Ashley Henry is here. So let's take this one. For those of us who are in a position to provide input to local, state, and federal economic development leaders, which is really all of us, what message would you like to see conveyed in order to not just restore the economy, but to create a clean, just, and future-ready economy? And maybe if I can put another word in there, a more resilient economy going forward.
Yeah, I think resilient is the word I would use as well. I think as we go through this, the fog and cloud of triage that we're trying to do right now, and just saving who we can save and figuring out what things are in the cupboard, what things are not in the cupboard, that's one piece of it. But a piece that we'll have to get to is really around resiliency and what are the things that we put into place in the ecosystem that help build resilient businesses and help business owners make informed decisions. And so, I've told Ashley, and I'm sure David this a number of times, we have to find more ways to get founders to see the value in connecting with the public sector. And if that means, Business for a Better Portland has to start a bus tour where every time there's session in Salem, hey, Thursday's the bus day, let's fill up the bus with 15 to 20 founders, and they go down there and they meet with legislators, so be it. I think that kind of thing is a game changer. And having the conversations with the Economic Development Committee, since the summer, I think a lot of people were surprised at how little information was getting to them about the plight of small business owners. I know I was definitely shocked at the things that they did not know. It's been awesome to see Representative Lively become engaged. But from where I sit, I was like, man, what were the economic development things you guys were working on prior to this? And so, their voice really matters, and you've got to develop trust and relationships, right? And so this isn't about, just developing new programs and throwing checks out there. It's got to be built all on top of trust. And so I'm a big supporter of figuring out a way to have like a small business czar for the city of Portland. You and Paige doing that, bridging that gap. But I think we'll figure that out. We've got to.
And then Ashley asked a question, which is tangential, but I think is enough of a different flavor that I'd really like your take on it. I've been told that startup entrepreneurs aren't particularly interested in public policy. So from the other side of it, the entrepreneurs aren't really dedicating the time. Do you see ways that the lack of entrepreneur voices connecting with our elected officials could be actually hurting the entrepreneur community and small business community, especially in this crisis?
I think I understand it correct. Go back to what I said earlier of a key ingredient to being a founder is you don't know what you don't know, right? So if the underlying assumption is I don't know what I don't know, and I'm making assumptions, about everything about that, I may very well assume that there is nothing the public sector has that can help my business. They don't care about me, or they have nothing to do with my success. That may be an assumption that I have that's not really based in anything. And so I think it's on the public sector and other organizations to go and meet founders where they're at, because founders are working on 1,000 things. And so I think it's that they don't see the value. And so I do believe that it's hurting them. And as someone who worked at the city for a long time, we had businesses that would use a ton of our products at PDC because they felt like they cracked the code and they figured it out. Meanwhile, neighbors next to them are like, nah, I'm good. I don't need anything. Well, it's a grant. Nah, I'm good. That's more time than I want to take to fill that out. And so it was fascinating to see this divide between someone's like, well, what else do you got for me? Like, I love the last 3 things. What else can I get? And then their neighbor be like, nah, I'm good. And some of this comes back to helping business owners figure out how to spend time working in their business, but also spending time working on their business. And that's, I think, oftentimes where the resources that are available at the state, city, and federal level come into play is those founders that are able to step away from being behind the counter and really looking strategically at what it would look like to do, procurement opportunities at the state level or, other things. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good. I love this one because you can't say me. What members of the PDX community, public, nonprofit, and private business, and you can't say Rick, are the most indispensable leaders right now for founders?
Ooh, man.
Say Mitch.
Man. Can you repeat that one more time?
Oh, we can't say Mitch either, apparently. What members of the Portland community, be they public, nonprofit, or private business, are the most indispensable leaders right now for founders? Maybe, and to put a little more context on it, Scott, maybe ones that they might not even know about, but because of the circles you run in, you recognize the value of this leader, and they could use some more spotlight and limelight.
Gotcha. I think a total hidden gem in the community is OMEP, the Oregon Manufacturers Extension Partnership, which most people have never probably heard of. But if you make or assemble anything in the state of Oregon, they are the company that helps you build a strategy and process behind it. And the city offers grants to help pay for their consulting services. But they are the biggest hidden gem that I've worked with over the last 20 years that I can't say enough great things about their work. But it goes back to especially early stage founders. They don't know what they don't know. And while they're really, really focused on scaling and growing, they may not be thinking about strategy, processes, and safety. And so when I was at Albina Community Bank, we worked with them and Mud Shark Studios, who makes ceramic containers. And they had Martha Stewart gave them an award. And overnight, literally, their sales went from 2 or 3 these growlers, beer growlers, a week to 200 or 300. And working with OMEP was the difference between them being able to take advantage of that opportunity and that change in sales, putting them out of business. And that would have been what would happen. It would have put them out of business. It's not glamorous, sexy stuff, but an HR manual and figuring out where your power outlets need to go in your space are really important when you're assembling things.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's awesome. Good call. Okay, there's a pie question. I'm going to skip that and comment on that so that we can get to questions for Steven. Let's do this one. Do you have any predictions you believe will come out as a result of what society and business has been going through? What opportunities do you believe will present themselves via this experience? You're getting deep questions. I'm like, people from me are like, how do you apply for pie? And I'm like, oh, I can answer that one.
So I think this is unlike any time that we've ever had in history, right? So it's really hard to go and say, oh, well, when this happened before, X, Y, and Z happened. But I will say this, when we have downtimes in the market, war, recession, it's generally a time where we see entrepreneurship grow and evolve. And I remember clear as day, 2008, all the amazing businesses that were being started. And it was just because really, really smart people all of a sudden were available, and they knew other really, really smart, talented people that were also available. And, Intel didn't want to pay them anymore, or Nike didn't want to pay them anymore. So all of a sudden that side hustle or idea that they had been noodling on, all of a sudden it had a little bit more legs. And so those kind of collisions are going to happen more and more right now, especially when, some places are going to be looking at 20, 25% unemployment. That's a lot of really, really talented people that are now able to put their mind, talent, energy towards other things in a changing market. So, we're going to have new things, evolve and come out of this that didn't even exist anymore. I remember being in college in the late 90s, and my economics professor told me, 35% of the positions you're going to be in your life don't exist yet. So I'm trying to teach you problem solving and how to work in groups and to communicate so that you can be ready for those opportunities, but they don't exist yet. I think similar coming out of this, there'll be businesses and opportunities and industries that didn't exist before COVID come out of this and be an opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, and kind of like that co-founder problem we were talking about before, where it's like co-founders have been at a premium for a while, and now suddenly there are going to be a lot of opportunities to find the co-founder that you need.
Yep. And maybe this was just the last little nudge somebody needed, right? And they're going to go and pull something out of the dusty drawer that they had in mind mind 5 years ago, but now's the time to pull it off.
Okay, we got time for a couple more. So, ooh, this is an interesting one from Nate Travers. What do you see as short-term work and lifestyle changes that we'll see once the pandemic slows down? That is, like events, office space setups, social interactions. Where do you see that going once the market starts to correct a little bit?
Everyone that I've talked to, even the most introverted of us all, are clamoring to be around other human beings.
Mhm.
I think human beings are made to be around other people, be in proximity, share pheromones, whatever. And so I think one of the corrections we'll see is those event people who haven't had anything to do for the last, month, 2 months. Everybody and their mom is going to try and get an event going, and people are going to be like, yes, I'll do it. I'll go to that event. I'll go to that event because I haven't been able to go. I don't think there's going to be a lot of trepidation around people coming together when we get the green light. I think it'll be a free for all, and people will really, really want to be able to do that. So I think that'll be a short bump that we'll see big time. That'll be hard for people that haven't been very busy over the last couple of months.
Okay. This is a good one because you and I talk about early stage stuff so much that here's one that says, what can Black startups do to better position themselves for optimal funding during their growth stage?
Well, if you make it to growth stage, so you're not early stage and you're growing, funding will more than likely find you. I remember being in Boulder, Colorado, and Brad Feld was speaking at an event there, and it was a 3-minute on the agenda. It showed that it was a 3-minute talk, and we all thought it was 30 minutes, and it was just a typo. But sure enough, he came out on the stage, and the talk was about getting funding from VCs, and he said, "Build a great fucking business. I'll find you." And he walked off the stage. At the end of the day, you have to make sure the funding that you're looking for matches where you need to go as a business, and that it's a need, not something where you're searching for legitimacy of your business. And the more you can put off finding funding, and I'm making an assumption here, but I assume you meant equity in the question. The person asking the question, don't bring another cook into the kitchen if you don't have to, right? And growth is the number 4 killer of businesses in the United States. Access to capital is number 5. So I would be, if you're truly growth stage, I would be more concerned around, making sure you're doing healthy growth and not putting yourself into a bad position. Then where are we going to be getting funding from where this goes? Because believe it or not, here's a perfect example. WeWork grew really, 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 really fast. And SoftBank came out through billions of dollars. And I think they're going to have a pretty tough time coming out of this. And so, have a plan for every cycle of your business. And if you're in growth stage, that means the negotiating is shifting over to you, and you'll be in a pretty good position, but know the kind of funding that you need. And don't be chasing funding that is just, newsworthy or whatever. Because most businesses never raise funding. Like, that's just the reality. I wish we heard more about the digital trends of the world, companies in Portland building $50 million companies that have never raised a dime. We don't hear about that a lot. But that's the normal thing that businesses do. So even if you're in a growth stage, does not necessarily mean you're going to be taking on capital. And if you're growing, and also a good opportunity to talk to your banker about what your needs are and how they're changing.
All right, we gave you a bunch of hard ones, so we'll give you at least one softball. Is now a good time to rewatch The Wire? And what should we learn from it?
So quintessential, the reason, so back in 2010, I watched The Wire for the first time. And at the time, if you Googled The Wire, the first thing that came up was the reason Netflix was created. That's all. That's it's magic. As someone who had his formative years on the east side of Detroit, The Wire really touches me. But from a startup standpoint, everything that they're talking about around drug dealing and business and politics, it's all startup stuff. I mean, it is. And at some point, someone will get the rights to the show and be able to write the Wire MBA book. But it's great characters, great personalities, so well written, and just I just got done doing all 5 seasons last week. Like literally, I just watched it. String Bell, Omar. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. We've got a couple left, but we can probably get to them in comments. I wanted to reserve a little bit of time because I want to know what we can be doing for you, Stephen. How can we be helpful right now?
I'm one of the thousands of other folks that have been furloughed right now, and I think all the positive energy in the world that everyone's got, I think is super helpful right now, and just constant reminders that this too will pass, and that I know other doors will open as we come out of this. I hope that's still with Pensole, but it might not be. And so, warm wishes. Go and shop at Latinx and Black-owned businesses. Copy me in a tweet. That'd be awesome. I think every little bit helps. I mean, I think that's my slogan for COVID is every little bit helps.
Cool. Thank you. Where can people find you, like on Twitter and that kind of stuff?
Normally, you can find me at Deadstock, where I have my own store. But
for the time being.
Yeah, for the time being, posted up on Twitter, PDX Stephen G, and that's STEPHEN. Steph Curry's ruined it for all of us. I'm there. Shoot me a DM if you need help with anything. I got some time in my hands. I'm actually helping out a business in New York right now and another business in Atlanta. So please, happy to share what I can, help people, particularly around loan and fundraising processes.
Okay. And how's your TikTok fame currently?
Man, if you have kids over the age of 7 and you're not on TikTok, I do not believe you have kids over the age of 7. I gotta go do some TikTok dance practice right after this.
Sweet.
Like I'm trying to get the Whoop thing. I don't know. I'll be embarrassing my 13-year-old. Believe that.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point. I'll force you to do it again. Thank you to Reverend Matt's Hard Cider, our unofficial sponsor for the unofficial mayor of Portland. Thanks for everybody who showed up. We've got a bunch of other ones lined up and ones that we're working on. So the easiest way to stay in the loop is to follow Pi on Crowdcast or follow Pi on Twitter or other social, and we'll keep you in the loop. But we hope this was worthwhile. Lots of great questions. We really appreciate you showing up and giving Stephen some hard questions to answer. All right, so catch you later. See ya.
Peace, everybody.
Bye.